personally. I wish you all the very, very best.
Thank you so much, sir. May I now request Mr. Vidhan Rasivasya, our founding chairman, to give us a short address and introduce our speaker. Vidhan, please.
Mr. President. I have great pleasure in extending a warm and hearty welcome to you all at this session on Sport to Entrepreneurship Transition with Shri Abhinav Mitra, Olympic gold medalist. I sincerely thank our chief guest, Shri Abhinav Bindra, for inaugurating Young Entrepreneurs Forum today. Though Shri Abhinav Bindra is a name who needs no introduction, still I would like to share a few words about him. He is currently India's only individual Olympic gold medalist. His gold in the 10-meter air rifle event at the Beijing 2008 Summer Olympics was also India's first Olympic gold medal since 1980. He is the first Indian to have held concurrently the world and Olympic gold titles for the men's 10-meter air rifle event, having earned those honors in the 2008 Summer Olympics and 2006 ISSF World Shooting Championship. He has also won 9 medals at the Commonwealth Games and 3 gold medals at the Asian Games. With more than 150 medals in his 22-year career, he is also the recipient of the Arjuna Award in 2000, Rajiv Gandhi Khel Ratna, India's highest sports award in 2002, the Padma Bhushan in 2009 from the Government of India, and Blue Cross, the highest shooting honor by International Shooting Sports Federation. Shri Bindra has made an honorary Lieutenant Colonel by the Indian Territorial Army in 2011. He also served as a Goodwill Ambassador for the Rio 2016 Olympics Indian contingent, having been appointed to that post by the Indian Olympic Association. On 5th September 2016, he announced his retirement. He is one of the top influencers of sports policy in the country. Since his retirement, Shri Bindra has been involved with the Target Olympic Podium Scheme, one of India's most significant policies for athlete development. He is the CEO of Abhinav Futuristic Private Limited, an organization that works to bring science and technology into sport and healthcare sectors. With a group of sports science and advanced physical medicine and rehabilitation centers, the organization has served more than 5,000 athletes and medical patients. His primary outreach to Indian sports is through the Abhinav Bindra Foundation, a non-profit initiative where athletes are provided access to the latest sports technology and high-performance physical training for free. Many athletes from sports such as swimming, badminton, boxing, and para-athletics have benefited from the foundation's various programs. He is currently a member of the IOC Athletes Commission. Sorry. I will not take much of your time as we all are eager to hear from our chief guest now. I request Shri Akash Shah, President MCCI, to initiate the conversation with Shri Abhinav Bindra to know his journey from sports to entrepreneurship.
Uh, I think first I would like to thank you once again for agreeing for a freewheeling discussion. People appreciate question answers a lot more, and I'm sure there would be some questions from both our young members as well as some from media who are attending this webinar. So we would like to keep few minutes at the end for some questions from the house, if that's okay with you. But to get back to understanding a little bit more about this transition, to understand that, it's very important to know how did shooting become a part of your life, and when did it become an integral part of your daily routine and important to you.
Well, I was a reluctant athlete when I started off. As a young boy who went to boarding school initially, my only talent in life was to miss physical education classes at school. I was a fat boy who hated sport, I was a champion at just missing anything to do with sport. I finally got out of boarding school and joined a day school in Chandigarh, and I was looking for a pastime and a hobby, and that's where I got introduced to the sport of shooting. I went to my first formal shooting lesson with my first coach, Colonel Dhillon, and I loved the sport because to be successful in this sport, I had to stand still, and there was no running around needed. So that was the real reason why I actually got into it. But ironically, Physical fitness was a big weakness, which I converted into a big strength of mine down the years. But I just fell in love with the whole pursuit of it. It's a very individual sport. It is a very, I think it is, shooting is the most private sport practiced in a public domain. It's an internal battle, and you are really responsible for. You have to own your successes and you have to own your failures. It is all dependent on you, and I liked that aspect of this sport, and that got my fascination. It is a very feeling-oriented sport. You're always challenging your own self. There is no finish line to greatness in this sport. It demands perfection. But as you know, chasing perfection is like chasing an untamable beast. But it makes the pursuit very exciting, and it makes it interesting because more than just an outcome, it suddenly becomes a human pursuit with your own self, trying to be better every single day, trying to show up at practice when nobody is watching, and give it and try to give it your all. And that to me was something which, that aspect of it, the process of this whole sport, is something which I really enjoyed. I look back now a little bit at my journey of 20 years in sport a little bit more dispassionately, because I have exited my investment of sorts. So I look back at it, not at the few medals that hang on my wall, but I look back at the relationships that I built, the memories that I have. I don't look at it at the final outcome. I don't look at it as an Olympic champion. That is not the dearest. That is not the most favorite part of it. But I look back at it, and the most interesting part of it is what sort of a person I became in the process of achieving a gold medal at the Olympics. And that, to me, that whole journey to me has been an incredible learning, which I look back at with tremendous gratitude and fondness.
Sure. So, that brings me to my next question. Shooting is a sport with a lot of senior people, and the peer group is very experienced. How did you set expectations as a young athlete for yourself? And how did you prove yourself in a sport which is dominated by people a lot older to you and more experienced than you? So, could you just share
Yeah,
some
yes,
insights?
yes. That was definitely a challenge in my generation when I was growing up. Everybody around me was much, much older to me. Of course, that has changed completely now, because the whole shooting scene in India is very dominated by very young people. A lot of school-going children practice the sport and are tremendously successful in it. So over the couple of decades, we've seen a definite change. But definitely, you're right that when I was growing up, it was always competing with much more experienced people. It was about hanging out with people who were double your, triple your age. I remember my first competition of significance was the Commonwealth Games in Kuala Lumpur. I was 15 years old, and my roommate was 50 years old. So it was a little bit of. I don't think it was a challenge. I thought it was an interesting dynamic, but it was about. I was hungry for knowledge. I was thirsty for knowledge, and I think from very early on, I think, and that is something maybe was a part of my upbringing, was that I started to develop a very open mind to different thought processes, open mind to different suggestions. You know, during the course of my career, I received a lot of suggestions from different quarters, and of course, I did not always follow each and every one of them, but I always um, try to respect another perspective. And that is exactly how I overcame this challenge when it was a very interesting dynamic of really being surrounded by many, much more older people. So it was about learning, and it was trying to learn from their experiences and see how it fits into my puzzle and how I could benefit from their knowledge. And it was about just being open, just doing everything with an open and flexible mind.
Okay. Uh, you know, Beijing 2008 was special. It changed the way things were to come for you in the future. Could you share a little bit about how did you perceive yourself differently after 2008? What changed? And if you could share a little bit about that.
Yes, I think it was, of course, the greatest moment of my sporting career in the sense of an outcome. It was the thrill of my life. It was life's goal achieved. But I think, to be very frank with all of you, I think success also brings in its set of challenges. We often look at failure, and we often ask, how do you overcome failure? But I think more importantly, it is about how to deal with success, which is sometimes even more challenging than dealing with the failure. And to me, Beijing, in many ways, was my life's biggest crisis. It was my life's biggest crisis, primarily because I had chased a goal for 15 years of my life. I had gone to bed with a dream and woke up every morning, giving it my all to pursue that dream to make it a reality. And one fine day, that goal was achieved, and the singular goal that I had in my life was to win a gold medal, and suddenly that gold medal was in my pocket. So it took a lot of understanding of myself. It took a while before I could retune my goals and find the desire and the hunger to go on, which suddenly evaporated on achieving a very large goal that I had set out for myself. And that just took time, and that just took understanding about myself. And it is interesting how I overcame this challenge. Post Beijing, I there was a big part of me which wanted to give up and move on in life and find my next calling because my goal was achieved. So I decided, I was very confused, and I decided that I would go on a 10-day Vipassana course, which is a 10-day silent retreat where you go and meditate for 10 days. And my idea was to maybe try and find my next calling in life. So I go to this meditation retreat where I am quite where I'm supposed to meditate for many hours. And all I end up doing in these 10 days was to think back at my sport, think back at the process of my sport and how I could do better. So that taught me something more. That taught me that I really loved the process of what I did. And the boring and the mundane brought me back to compete more. The boring and mundane was to get back to training and to give it your best when no one is watching, and when there is nothing at stake, and bring your A game to it. Sometimes success in achieving great success is about doing the mundane and the boring well and efficiently enough with the right energy from day to day. And it is exactly that which brought me back for more, because I was still in love with the process of what I did. So that was what was my personal challenge at post Beijing. Of
Mhm.
course, it was also a great moment and a fantastic outcome. But more than the outcome, I'm a very detached person. I detach myself from outcomes. For me, it is more about the journey. It is more about the process, and doing everything that you can within your will, within your own willpower and your ability to give it your best every single day. The Olympics, yes, come once in 4 years, but to me as an athlete, the Olympics came every single day.
Awesome. You know, Mr. Bindra, you obviously grappled with this aspect that you had achieved a gold medal, and then what? Quite well, because you did actually retire in 2016. You spent another good 8 years playing sport at the highest level. So this begs the question: when, what was that reason that you decided to quit sports in 2016? You could have played for longer. You could have retired earlier. What happened, and why did you choose to quit and retire from sport? And what was the reason behind the same?
Well, several reasons. I could recognize the my fading talent, whatever little talent that I had. I could recognize that. I was aging of sorts, and it was a decision which was not taken one day to the other. It was a decision and a transition which was planned for, because an athlete's life is very, very unique. We almost live two lives. You have a life when you are competing as an active athlete, which I did for 22 years, and then suddenly your an athlete's life ends very abruptly. And from one day to the other, what do? So you really have to plan for it. We live almost two lives. We live an active athletic life, and then we have to restart our lives and realign ourselves, realign our thinking to come in contact with real life to a certain degree, and that is a definite. It is a very challenging transition, and has to be carefully thought of and carefully planned. And that is one aspect I did pretty well, because I took my time to come to a decision and come to peace with myself that that the Rio Olympic Games will be my last shot at this. And after competing, after the last shot at the Rio Olympics, where I finished fourth, I've never ever been back to a shooting range. I've never ever held a rifle ever again. I don't even own one anymore. So I was I was at peace with myself, and I think that is something very, very important, because at the end of the day, I think yes, we are looking for external validation in life. We are looking for external outcomes in life, but I think the most important thing is that you have to be answerable to yourself. And I've lived a very honest life. I've lived a life where I've always challenged myself, and I've been critical or very hard on myself, and asked myself brutally honest questions throughout my career. And when it was time to move away, it was a time when I was completely at peace with my decision. So although life post my retirement from sport is very different, uh, challenging in many other ways, I'm completely comfortable at being uncomfortable of sorts.
Wow. So it's actually quite unbelievable that you don't own a rifle anymore. Personally, I would believe that you would still go shooting at least recreationally once in a way. But this is an insight and, an eye opener to me. Now coming on to the second life that you were speaking about of an entrepreneur. Uh, Please share with us what athlete mindset or what traits that you picked up in your first life helped you in the world of business and helped you achieve your dreams in the corporate space. So if you could share a little bit of that, that would be quite insightful.
Well, of course, I think the set of values that I learned from sport remain integral to me as a person. It is about having the highest form of integrity. It is about having the highest form of honesty. And I think the shortest way to success, and we are all looking for shortcuts at times, the shortest way to success is hard work. That remains very consistent in what I did as an athlete and what I continue to do now. I am a very process oriented person. The world of sport and my own sporting career made me a very process oriented person, and I really do focus on the process. For me, I'm a very detailed oriented person. No detail is small enough for me to ignore. It is about doing the little things right. It is about finding efficiency in the boring and the mundane, and bringing better quality into it. At times you reach a level where you can't really improve in your skill set, but what you can do, what you can definitely continuously improve on, is your ability to execute a certain skill. And these are the philosophies and the values that I learned from sport, and that I try to bring into my everyday life now. Whenever I am in a crisis, and life is full of crises, and there will be challenges that will come by every human being at some point or the other. Whenever I find a challenge, I do look back at my sporting career and ask myself, how would I have handled this situation in the context of my sport, because my sport taught me to become comfortable with the uncomfortable. And business life is also sometimes challenges you and puts you under uncomfortable positions, but again, with the right integrity and with the right values and with honesty, I think, and with the ability to work hard. It is also um, it is a little bit of a transition as well for me. As an athlete, everything revolved around me. I was the central figure, but in other lives, and I had a team around me which I had to handle. But now in business life, it is also about a lot of other moving parts. It is all about bringing everybody together, bringing a team together for the same goal. Of course, it was also pretty similar in sport. Even though I was in an individual sport, I had a complete team around me, which was working for me to get the best out of myself. And I was a manager of sorts as well, handling this team. because when and at times I had a very large entourage at the Beijing Olympics. I had 9 people working for me who were helping me in different aspects of my sport, and that meant that I had to handle 9 human beings and 9 very sensitive human beings with sometimes different perspectives. So I had to also work with different egos, work with different people, and try and get the best out of each one of them for myself. And those learnings is what I try and put in business life as well.
Sure. You spoke about crisis and how you look back at your sporting career to face challenges and crisis in your business avatar. But every businessman also faces a lot of setbacks. And in these times when COVID has played havoc with the way the economy is functioning, there are setbacks, and more than a fair share of businessmen are facing a lot of setbacks. Any advice you have for us who are listening to you today on how we can effectively tackle or overcome setbacks?
Yes, and I think again, I look back at my sporting career and I'll try and answer it from my learnings from there. And there are 2 elements which come into play. I think one, as an athlete, you have to be very adaptable to various changing situations. Sometimes in your control, sometimes also outside of your control, and you have to learn how to adapt, and you have to learn how to adapt quickly. And I think that trait I think is very useful for even business and struggling businesses at this time on how you could better adapt to situations. The number 2 point, and maybe it even comes before the adaptability, is acceptance. I think sometimes we find it as human beings, our tendency when put under uncomfortable situations, under difficult situations, is to resist situations to a great degree, and that sometimes really comes in our way of progress, and in our way of actually solving problems and challenges quickly, because we create this inner resistance from within ourselves, and it is human to do that. I don't think that you can be completely, you will fight and resist it a little bit, but at times you also have to learn how to accept and stop the resistance and move on. And as soon as you accept a situation, you accept a challenge rather than resisting it, your mind opens up, and just opens up to be a little bit more positive. It opens up to look at solutions rather than continuously whining about the challenge. And it just starts to work in a very different way because you are looking for solutions. As soon as you start to look for solutions, your mind is already much more positive. And I think these are 2 elements which maybe could come in handy in challenging times as today's.
Sure. I'm sure I'll give it a try at least. I'm sure many others would as well.
It is easier said than done, but you can never give up. So you have to keep trying.
Your whole journey has allowed you to also give back to sport, and especially with the Abhinav Bindra Foundation, you have done quite a bit. Some of our members today would like to know a little bit more about what you're doing with the foundation and how it's making a meaningful difference in the sporting landscape of the country.
Well, of course, I received so much in my sporting career. It made me a very fulfilled human being, and I've received so much in the last 22 years. So the act of giving back becomes even much more important to me as a human being. My primary outreach to Indian sport is through the Abhinav Bindra Foundation. We have 3 pillars that work in the foundation. The first is intervention, where we've set up cutting edge centers of high performance, which employ cutting edge technology and sports science from across the world and bring in global best practice in the areas of performance enhancement, injury management, and injury prevention. We give out a scholarship program to young grassroots level athletes. It's called the STEAM Scholarship Program. It stands for Science, Technology, Engineering, Analytics, and Medicine. And we try and bring in all those elements into young athletes training. I'm a great believer in supporting grassroots level training. Our elite athletes in today's time and age are receiving, fortunately, a lot of support There are organizations privately funding them. The government is doing 99.9% of the work. So that's all well and good. But we still have to see that support infiltrate down to the grassroots. It is about creating champions and not just piggy banking on successful athletes anymore. We have to create these young champions, and we have to support them from a very young age. It is very important that they have a good, strong foundation. And that is my attempt to provide them with a very good, solid foundation backed by science, backed by data, backed by technology. So that is one element of it. We have 6 centers across the country where we provide these trainings and employ all this cutting edge technology. The second pillar of the foundation is education. It is not just about supporting athletes, but it is also about building the ecosystem that surrounds the athlete and building world-class coaches, world-class support staff. We've just recently set up the Abhinav Bindra Sports Medicine and Research Institute in Bhubaneswar, where we've again bringing in best global practice, and we are starting initially courses, bachelor's and master's courses in physiotherapy, and moving on to sports science. We are providing scholarships for that as well to all these students. The second element of education is on governance. You all may have often read about many stories of Indian sport which talk about the governance challenges, and many frightening stories that you may have heard about poor quality of governance. But it's no good to just talk about it. You have to also make an attempt to improve this whole thing. And there, alongside our foundation partners, the ELMS Foundation, we set together a program to empower our sports administrators. We set up a program with the University of Loughborough, which is the world's most prestigious sports university at the moment, to again bring global best practice in making our administrators aware of what it takes to create champions, what it creates to create and foster an environment of high performance, and what it takes to bring in all the elements together in governance, because that is something so critical when we go ahead. The third element of education and advocacy, which we're doing, is on athlete mental health. I think mental health is something which is such a stigmatized subject in society in general, and in the world of sport even more, because there's such a big misconception that athletes are superhuman beings, but in all reality, athletes are human beings first and as vulnerable as anybody else. So we're doing a lot of work in the advocacy of creating psychologically safe environments for our athletes. So there's a lot of work there. The third and last element, which I'm specifically very proud of, is using sport for social good. And the power of sport is absolutely immense. It inspires people. It changes people's life in positive ways. And there, alongside a former rival of mine and now a very good friend, Niccolò Campriani is an Italian athlete from my sport, 3-time Olympic champion. Both of us retired from sport again at Rio. Both of us were very inspired by the whole refugee cause. The Rio Olympic Games saw the first ever international refugee team take part at the Olympic Games. These are individuals who've gone through immense hardship in life. They've been displaced from their native land through and been through extreme hardships. So Niccolò is based out of Switzerland in Lausanne, where he works for the International Olympic Committee. And there we set a selection of 25 refugees, and we picked 3 of them and started to train them in the sport of shooting. And we are very hopeful that at least a couple of them will make it to Tokyo this year, to the games which will be held, and be part of the international refugee team, take part, and be part of the refugee team. So that's the work of the foundation. It takes away a significant amount of my time and effort, but again, it is something which is very meaningful to me. It makes me feel very, very good from within, and I'm just trying to do my best to give back.
So, it's so heartening to know that what you're doing is not trying to feed somebody, but creating an ecosystem where people can, fish for themselves. And I think that's something which is really remarkable and appreciable. You are putting in the long haul, you're putting in effort, which might take even decades to show real fruit. But I think that's where champions, stand out. So thank you for that. But coming back to something you just mentioned about athlete mental health, and you've done a lot of work on that. Could you share on how we could abstract that to the corporate world, because mental health is also a challenge in the corporate space, and as business leaders who are responsible for small and large workforce, what are the small steps we can take to ensure better mental health of our team members?
Yes, I think it's a very good question, and I think very similar, because I think even in the corporate world, it is all about performance. You're trying to get the best performance out of all your colleagues and your employees and co-workers. And there is always a lot of pressure. There's always a lot of pressure to get results and to get outcomes. And you're always talking about how you can improve performance on the field of play, and you're on the field of play in business, maybe in your particular field. In sport, it may be your chosen sport. But I think it is again a change in attitude. What you really need to do is put human well-being at the heart and center of high performance. You have to look at your athletes as human beings first. You have to look at your colleagues in the corporate world as human beings first, and you have to try and set out programs which help them with their human wellness, with their human well-being. I personally believed in an equation which was a really wrong equation to believe in, that a gold medal will equal happiness. And it is really a wrong equation to believe in. And actually, you have to switch the equation around, and happiness actually equals a gold medal. And it's exactly the same principle that has to apply in the corporate world as well. A happier workforce, a more balanced workforce will make a much more successful workforce, and in turn will get you the results that you're all aspiring to achieve. So it is important to keep that in mind. It is important to while you also try and improve the performance of your workforce, you also have to give the human well-being part of your workforce an equal amount of weightage, because if you're able to do that, you'll just make much more well-rounded human beings. And I think research shows that a more well-rounded human being, a well-balanced human being, a happier human being, a more positive human being will be able to get many more results in a sustained fashion. You can abuse your passion, you can give it too much. You have to strike the right balance. And I think that is absolutely critically important to set a way which will give you sustainable results. If you just burn out a particular individual, you will maybe get good short-term results, but I don't think that those will be sustainable results. And if you're really looking for growth, if you're really looking for performance, then you also have to look at sustainability, and sustainability also is an integral part of performance and human performance.
Great. Now coming back to the business of sports, how has the sport industry evolved in these last few years? And as non-sports people, what can businesses, how can they contribute to this industry and have a mutually beneficial relationship? So for people like us who are not from the sporting fraternity, we're not active sportsmen or played at a state or a national level, but how can we be a part of this industry?
Well, I think in several ways. I think, of course, the business of sport is something which is developing in India. It is becoming a profitable business in certain areas. There it is creating much more employment in different fields, because India is a very young country, and sport is something getting much more important to our young demographics. So it is something which will continue to grow. I think the business of sport will continue to grow in the years to come. So that is from the business of sport. Of course, there is an element of helping out sport through CSR activities. I think supporting Olympic sport is part of the CSR mandate. So that is something that businesses can also look at if you're passionate about sport. And even if you don't want to write a check, or if you're unable to write a check or support in a financial transactional way, that is perfectly all right. And I think each one of you and each one of us as Indians can support sport by just going and watching sport. I competed for 22 years in my life in sport too, and nobody came and watched me compete in India. And then I suddenly had to go to the Olympic Games and compete in front of 30,000 spectators. It was very overwhelming. So each of you can maybe start to build a culture of sport in India. Just start to take your kids to watch sport initially, maybe involve them in sport, maybe not to make them Olympic champions or world champions, but just to, for their number one, their health, but also to make them really strong, well-rounded human beings, because the power of sport is immense. The values that sport brings to the fore are immense, and it will ensure that it prepares them well for the greater challenges that lay ahead in their lives. So I think these are all contributions each one of us can make. It's not always about writing a check and supporting that. I think each one of us has the ability to create a culture of sport in India. Each one of us has the ability to support sport in some way or the other, and it can be as simple as just going and watching sport.
Great. We before I actually open up the floor for questions, I would now request, we have many of our past presidents of our chamber, and I'd like to first acknowledge their presence, Mr. MC Shah, Mr. Suresh Junjunwala, Mr. Vishal Jhajaria, and Mr. Vivek Gupta, who's our immediate past president. Sir, if any of you would like to, ask Mr. Bindra a question, that would be really great. And because I have many questions that the audience wants to ask, then I'll go to the audience. Okay. This is one question. Yeah, Mr. Shajaria, please go ahead.
Yeah, I would like to congratulate our current president, Mr. Akash Shah, for launching of this youth forum, first of all, and for getting Mr. Abhinav Bindra for this launch. It's a fantastic speaker to have with us. And I would like to congratulate Vidhan also and Anshuman for taking this forward. I just have one question for Mr. Bindra. You know, we all talk of sports and business together, and business of sports. But you know, to be a good businessman, I think you have to have some sports in you. Otherwise, you can't have sportsman spirit. So, how do we build sportsman spirit into the business people?
Well, I think you asked a very good question. And I think not just business, I think it is a greater societal question as well. I think as a society, I think we want our people, citizens, to be more sporting in nature, more open-minded in nature, more open to different perspectives, having that sportsman spirit. And I think that can only happen when I think more and more of us just involve ourselves in playing more sport. Of course, having program or forcing your kids to play sport, I think is very important, because they will be your next generation of business leaders. So you have to start with them, but also within your workforce, maybe also create some programs within your organizations which have certain sporting elements to it, have certain sporting activities to it. I think that is something which a lot of learning can come that way. I think, for example, I also, when I evaluate my employees in a yearly basis, I also look, a small element of what I look at is how fit and how healthy they are, and what they're doing to help themselves, either playing a sport or doing something for their health and for themselves. And when they have to be appraised every year, I also look at this element, and I try and incentivize it. That is something. These are the little few things that you can do, but I think, again, contributing by creating a culture of sport, just for sheer the recreational element of sport. I'm not saying that we are making champions here, but just playing sport for the sheer joy of playing sport, and to learn and to gain the values and that sport brings to the fore.
Great.
Yeah, but I'll just add to this, because so in real life, one has to accept losses also. And as a sportsman, once you lose, you get up and try again. So that, and in business, many times people get dejected and they don't want to try again. So that spirit of sportsmanship has to be built into the business people also. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other past president would like to ask Shri Bindra a question? Okay. I have one question from somebody who's watching on Facebook. So we are trying to bring in questions. The question is, you won the Olympic gold medal, but you had taken the training privately. What was the reason for that? And what do you think of the current Indian infrastructure for shooting? You did mention that the government is doing a lot now, but this is a question that we got from Mr. Akshay Agarwal.
Yes, so when I started 20 years ago, the sport was not very developed. We did not have the requisite knowledge. We hardly had the infrastructure. So I was fortunate that I had very supportive family, and I was able to gain the infrastructure and, more importantly, the knowledge required to become an athlete. And it was not completely based on trial and error. Things have dramatically changed over the last decade or so. I think there has been tremendous success, continued success in the sport of shooting. The sport has developed to a great degree. The government supports the National Rifle Association of India, which is the national federation for the sport. The federation is fairly well run. They've done an incredible job in setting up a very solid grassroots program, a junior program. And that is primarily the reason you see at the moment a lot of success coming in from the sport of shooting, and a lot of young boys and girls doing really, really well. And I use the word boys and girls literally because they're 15, 16-year-old kids who are being the best in the world in the elite category. So it is very, very heartening to see. And I'm sure that over the next years, we will see more success in the sport of shooting, but also in many other sporting disciplines. As I said, we are a young country. Our demographic is very young. And to this young generation, sport is important. And that is fantastic to see. And sport no longer can be ignored anymore. And it is now slowly but surely getting a higher degree of importance in policy, in funding, and that is nice to see. Of course, our country has several other challenges, and sport can suddenly not become the number one priority. And still a lot of work needs to be done to really do enough to match our aspirations that we have of winning multiple gold medals at the Olympics, and a lot of work needs to be done. But we do see some progress, and it is heartening to see that progress. And I think it will require a collaborative effort of everybody, government, non-government agencies, each one of you, to contribute to this journey in whatever way you can, for us to really get to the next level. But of course, things are definitely improving, and I do hope that the Tokyo Olympics, which will now happen in July this year, we will end up with our best ever Olympic haul. Of course, the COVID situation is challenging because it has forced our athletes to also adapt to the change of schedule, etc. And it has brought in its own set of challenges. But I remain confident and hopeful that we will come back with a good haul from Tokyo.
Great. Now I would request Ms. Munmun Banerjee to make Mr. Sarkar from Bardhaman. It's one of the largest Bengali dailies out of East India, to ask. He has a couple of questions for Shri Bindra. So Munmun, please make Mr. Sarkar one of the panelists so he could ask his question directly. Mr. Avijit Sarkar.
Mr. Sarkar, are you there?
Yeah, he's there. He's just. Mr. Sarkar, please go ahead.
Hello.
Yeah, please go on.
Mr. Bindra. Hello. Mhm.
Yes, yes.
Hello.
Yes, I can hear you,
Ha.
Mr. Sarkar.
Mr. Bindra, who is the medal hope from shooting Indian shooting 2020 Tokyo to 2021 Tokyo Olympics? Who is the medal hope actually?
I think each one of them goes in as a medal hope. I would never like to name one person. I think each one of them has the ability to do their best on that particular day, and I think they have proved themselves over the last few years,
Mm,
being the best in the world. So I think
mm,
each one of them is a definite medal hope, and I think across the board in shooting, across the board in other disciplines, we go in to
mm,
Tokyo with many people who have the capability of returning with a medal. So I would definitely like to refrain myself
mm.
from naming a particular individual, but I have high hopes and consider each one of them as realistic medal potential going into Tokyo.
Okay. My second question. Hello. Mm.
Yeah, Mr. Sarkar, we limited
Huh.
to just three questions, so
Three
please go
questions.
ahead.
Now, just my second question.
Sure.
Uh, you hope on how many medals from Tokyo Olympics from Indian shooting? How many medals? Just
Mr. Sarkar, unfortunately, I am not in the business of speculation. I have no idea. I do
okay.
not. Sport is
Mm,
something, as you
mm,
probably know, being in the field of journalism is something. Sport
mm,
can never be scripted. There is
mm,
no black and white in sport. I
mm,
do not have many skills in the field of astrology to predict, but I do
mm,
hope that we do come back with many medals. I am hopeful, as I told you, that we will come back with our best medal haul,
mm,
and that would mean that we will cross 5, 6 medals in totality in different sports. That was our best medal haul was in London, if I'm not mistaken,
mm.
and I do hope that we will better that.
Okay.
Great. Uh, any other questions from any of the panelists? Please go ahead. Otherwise, we would like to take this as the last question. So, Shri Bindraji, we have received at least 7 or 8 questions all around, hoping to get a number from you as far as the Olympic is concerned. So, I'm not relaying those questions at all because I know your response.
Yes, as I said, I look forward to the best ever medal haul India has ever had. That would mean it would exceed 5, 6 medals. If we get double digits, that would be excellent. But if we get our best medal haul in our country's history, I think it would be great.
Great. So, before asking Mr. Anshuman Shah, who's the co-chair of MYEF, to propose a vote of thanks, I'd like to just highlight one thing you said. You mentioned that shortest way to success is hard work. I think that's something that each and every member of MYEF should take to heart and use it as a mantra, because we forget how important hard work is. Fame is achieved in a day. I'm sure you became a global sensation on one day in 2008, but nobody has seen the years and years of hard work that went in before that. So I think that's a mantra we all should live by. And on behalf of Merchant Chamber of Commerce and YEF, we will want to reach out to you and your team to see how we can partner with you in taking the agenda of sports further. And given that a lot of the YEF members have gotten out of academic institutions in the last 5, 7 years, they would like to bring back, give something back to their uh, the schools and colleges they've been a part of, and maybe they can work with your team to see how that's possible.
Most definitely, my team will be at your disposal.
Great. So with that, I'd like to request Mr. Anshuman Shah to propose a vote of thanks.
Yes, thank you, sir. So, after a very engaging and insightful conversation on sport to entrepreneurship transition, I take this opportunity to wholeheartedly thank our guest, Shri Abhinav Bindra ji, the former Olympic gold medal winner and entrepreneur, for gracing this webinar and enlightening us on the issues regarding sport to entrepreneurship transition. We are grateful to you, sir, for shedding light on this transition. We are also thankful to you for launching MCCI's YEF today. I sincerely thank all the representatives of the press and electronic media for their kind presence and continued support to us. With these few words, I express my heartfelt thanks to the members of our chamber, friends, and business associates for the gracious presence at this session. I now propose a hearty word of thanks for Shri Abhinav Bindra and request you all to carry this with acclamation. Thank you.
Yeah, before we end the program, I would actually request there's a small video that we would like everybody to have a look at. It's regarding the foundation work. So if Mr. Bindra's office could screen that, that would be very, very helpful. Please.
Small pieces that were the difference. I remember constructing airplane models when I was a child. It kept me engaged, and I spent every waking hour putting them together. What fascinated me the most were the little things, the small pieces that were the difference between a complete model and, well, starting all over. As I grew as an athlete, who knew that would become a key marker of success in my journey through sport? I've been fortunate to learn from global best practice across the world, and I've worked hard to understand what separates the win from loss, the silver from the gold, the good from the excellent. At the end of the day, when standing in a final with equally talented competition, it is the little things that make the difference. And that's where the idea was born.
The Abhinav Bindra Foundation looks to bring global best practice into the Indian landscape by focusing on the little things, the finer aspects of the evolving landscape that help India put its best foot forward towards excellence. It's a simple process focusing on three pillars. Through high performance training with STEAM, science, technology, engineering, analytics, and medicine, the technology used at the centers of physical excellence trains over 50 athletes from different sports with an eye on the 2024 and 2028 Olympics. Data-driven intervention is more accountable, customizable, and actionable for an athlete's long-term development. Awareness of mental health, working with leaders and administrators on high-performance sports systems, creating a landmark platform for physiotherapy and sports science education with the Abhinav Bindra Sports Medicine and Research Institute. The objective is to create conversation, contextualize best practice for the Indian landscape, and empower the ecosystem to incorporate the learnings in the everyday. The ecosystem also benefits from giving individuals a chance to influence other parts of their life through sport, be it scholarships for deserving candidates in the Abhinav Bindra Sports Medicine and Research Institute, or the powerful initiative of Make a Mark. The foundation looks to ensure that no one gets left behind.
Mental wellness of an athlete is key to their peak performance. It facilitates best performance by keeping the athlete stay confident, stay internally motivated. As much as mental health of an athlete is the athlete's own responsibility, it is also the responsibility of the sports ecosystem. The sports ecosystem on its part can provide the athlete with a psychologically safe environment that makes the athlete feel safe for interpersonal risk-taking, where the athlete feels respected and the athlete feels accepted as an integral part of the sports ecosystem. Mental wellness is also a little, very crucial thing that allows for excellence.
A strong backing of sports science for athletes, coaches, and support staff is critical to ensure that an athlete is able to leverage their skill consistently. There is also a fine line between high performance and injury. We help athletes move forward on that path as well as create experts who can influence more. However, this is one of the little things that make excellence.
10 cities of activity in India, over 1,000 athletes, and more than 5,000 stakeholders influenced. We are just getting started, as these little things steadily are being accepted by the entire ecosystem as a sustainable and effective support system for sport.
As we come together as a nation, it's the everyday that counts, the finer elements of high performance, the little things that need our highest attention. With such a mindset, excellence can't be far behind.
Great. Thank you so much, everybody, for your time today, and especially Shri Abhinav Bindraji for taking out time And please hope, please expect us to be in touch with you to take your agenda of making sports relevant for many more people. And we will be in touch with you for that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you, sir.